Welcome everyone, I'm Thomas and today we'll talk about cameras and how their sensor sizes affect quality. Let's start with digital sensors. How do they work? In very simplified version, they're built up from very small solar panels. We can call them pixels. Pixels exchange light falling on them for electricity, which is then amplified and converted to digital signal. So basically, every pixel collects light. The more light it collects, the more voltage is created. This voltage then is boosted and converted to digital signal using ADCs. Then if you want to add more pixels of the same size, so you want to keep every pixel the same size, to keep the same density, we need to have light falling at the areas where we want the pixels, the new pixels to be. So if you have here APS-C sensor, that's the size of APS-C sensor, and you want to swap it for full frame sensor, you need the light to be falling on those areas. You need this light. If there is no light falling here, then those areas will be just black. And you will have the picture size of APS-C with black frame around it. All those pixels will not give you any information. There is no light falling on them. And this extra light will fill new pixels, giving us information about the new detail that wasn't available to us before. So we didn't have this all before. But now, since we have bigger full frame sensor, this light falling here will create new information for us. And the light falling here will not affect those pixels here at all. But in total, there has to be more light to cover those areas as well. And it's like renting rooms in hotel. If you charge on average £100 and you want to rent more rooms, charging on average £100, but in total you'll have more money. And bigger sensor have to collect more light for exposure to stay the same. Exposure is light per unit area, so exposure is the same for this pixel, and for this pixel, but total light falling on 4 pixels has to be 4 times the light falling on 1 pixel for the exposure to stay the same. Because you divide the total light by the unit area and then you have the exposure. So now we have those new pixels here collecting new light and introducing new information that wasn't available to us before. And what will happen if we crop those pixels in Photoshop? So we crop them out. There are no pixels from the full frame available to us anymore. And what happens to this light that was here? Because there was light here. Does it stay in the smaller frame? No, it's gone. This light is gone. There is less total light now to keep the same exposure. Because exposure is amount of light per unit area. In the light on smaller area, the total amount of light has to be lower than the total amount of light on the bigger area for the exposure to stay the same. And those pixels are gone, and all this light that was falling here is gone after we crop the image. And it has to be gone for exposure on this part to be the same. If this light stayed here, that would be brighter. We would have more information, more light falling here if this light would stay here. You might say that to create picture we still use the same amount of light. Even after we cropped it, we still used the same amount of light to create this picture. We just cropped all the information. Yes, we still use the same amount of light to create the picture, but we cropped all the light that was there and it's gone. It's not there anymore, and this picture, it uses less light to be displayed because this light is gone. We don't use it anymore. What practical difference does it make? If we add same size pixels to APS-C sensor, so if those pixels were the same size on the full frame, the new light collected by those pixels give us more resolution. There is new light coming on those pixels and total amount of light is more. If there was no light on those new pixels, it would be just APS-C size picture with black frame around it. But there is new light here, new detail, and that's how we get bigger frame and more resolution. And then the other way to use the more light, we can change the size of the pixels. We can make them bigger, and then each pixel will collect more light because they're like much more complicated solar panels. They collect the light, the light creates voltage, and then this voltage is boosted and convert it to digital signal. And when we boost the information, the voltage, the bigger the boost, the more noise is introduced. So the bigger the pixel that collects more light, the less boost we need for the exposure to stay the same. And then in the film, the bigger format would collect more light to give you more detail. It's exactly the same. You keep the same size of the grain on the film on the bigger format, but you collect the light from bigger area to create more detail. And then if you print the same size from APS-C format film, there is APS-C format film. If you print a 2 size picture from APS-C film, and then you take the same picture with the same exposure and the same lens settings, and using medium format, if you print it, you will have more detail. And this detail doesn't come from magic. It is there, this detail, it is there because we collected more light in total on the bigger format. We had to collect more light for the exposure to stay the same, because we cannot spread the same amount of light over bigger format and expect to have the same exposure. Exposure to stay the same in bigger format, you need to collect more light. And then the light meters, how do they work? Very simplified version. The light meter has a sensor that collects the light, amplifies it, and then converts to the digital signal. Total amount of light is divided then by the surface area of sensor in light meter to give us amount of light per unit area. Exposure is amount of light per unit area. So we have to divide the amount of total light on the light meter by the surface area of the light sensor on the light meter to get unit of light per unit area. And unit of light is energy in this case. And that's all. You need more light to spread it over bigger area to keep the same exposure. Those pixels are filled by light, new light introduced to get more detail. Even if they're the same size as APS-C pixels, there is still collect new light that was lost before. That's why you have bigger resolution. If they're different size, if they're bigger, then you have less noise. But the resolution and less noise, it doesn't come from nowhere. It's not magic. It's because there is new light collected, and there has to be new light collected for the exposure to stay the same. That's it.